Men, my date booty called another dude in front of me mid-date last night and left. What's the worst date you've experienced? Reddit opinion 1. I was invited on a date by a woman I met on Tinder. She said her friend was in town and they were going to see a live podcast and invited me along. It was a podcast I'd never heard of before, and honestly, I probably wouldn't have been very interested in it if I wasn't invited, but it cost about $25 to get in. I arrived, and she met me there. We bought drinks and sat down, and she introduced me to her friend. However, they then proceeded to talk to each other, not involving me in the conversation at all. Then some guy came along and sat next to her friend. He introduced himself to me, and I thought he was just being friendly. After the podcast, my date and her friend continued to talk to each other, completely ignoring me. This guy who introduced himself to me started having a conversation with me, which was fine since my date wasn't talking to me at all. It turns out this guy was her friend's date, but I had no idea, because no one was saying anything to me. The girls then wanted to meet the guy who was doing the podcast, so we waited in line for a while. Of course, the girls never said anything to us guys. They started talking to another woman in line and seemed to make a friend. After they got to meet the guy who did the podcast, my date's friend turned to us guys and said, "Well, we think we're going to have a girls' night out now." So our dates and the woman they met just left to go get drinks or something. The other guy and I just turned to each other and said, "What the fuck?" We then decided to go to a nearby bar for a beer and have a bro date. He was a decent dude, but the whole situation was just so weird. Reddit opinion 2. Not me, but my wife and I observed this in a nice restaurant in Berkeley, California, a long time ago. We were having the Prix Fix dinner and sat down a booth away from another younger couple, early 20s. After a while, the woman got up, presumably to go to the bathroom. We were minding our own business, but after a while, we noticed the guy was sitting there by himself for quite a long time. The waiter came up to him, and they had a serious conversation that we couldn't hear. Then they got up together and left. A few minutes later, they came back and the guy left. When we finished and were leaving, we asked the cashier what was going on. He said that the couple were on a date and had agreed to go Dutch on the Prix Fix dinner. Dinner for 2 plus wine would probably be $150 or so. And she ditched him after the main course. He did not have a credit card or enough cash to cover both of their dinners, so the waiter escorted him to the nearest automated teller machine outside, where he got cash to pay for both their meals. Poor guy, however. Oh, wow, not nearly as bad as your story. You win. Reddit opinion 3. We had a lovely time eating and went on to have a cocktail at the River Bar, a popular place for a date. After taking a seat, she looked around and suddenly started acting weird. At some point, she stood up and went to a table, arguing with a guy who was with a woman. She made a gesture, and I went over. She was telling the guy that she had moved on and I was her boyfriend now. We hadn't kissed before. It was our first date, but she tried to French kiss me and became quite forceful. I gently pushed her back and told her to calm down. She was angry and went to the bar to chat with a guy I assumed she didn't know, and went with him to sit at a different table, still standing next to the other couple. I didn't know how to feel, so we burst out laughing to shake the tension. Wished them a lovely evening and left. I guess this is one of my worst ones. Reddit opinion 4. During high school, the summer after junior year, I went to a house party hosted by some kids in the neighboring town I played travel soccer with. A really cute girl I didn't know overheard me mention that I was thinking of going to the beach the following day. She immediately started flirting with me for the rest of the night and strongly suggested that I take her with me so we could spend the day together. So I picked her up the next day and we got to the beach. To my surprise, all her closest guy friends, including the guy she clearly wanted to be with, were there. Apparently, she just needed me to get there and didn't bother introducing me to anyone. I felt like a fool. I stuck it out basically by myself for a few hours while she hung out with them. but I wound up getting the last laugh. They were heading back to one of their houses for a pool party and didn't have room for her. So she came back asking me if I wanted to go. I told her, sorry, I have plans, got in my car, and left her standing there in the parking lot. Her dad apparently had to come pick her up 2 hours later when he got off work. Reddit Opinion 5. We matched on Tinder on a Thursday night and we clicked immediately. We agreed to meet, but both had plans for Friday and Saturday. So we set a date for Monday night after work. The entire time in between, we were talking constantly, both super into each other. She was telling me how nervous she was because she was so interested in me that she wasn't ashamed to be that forward. As a guy, of course, I was into that. Monday rolled around and we were a couple of hours away from the date, still texting. But now she was super nervous and not sure what to wear. I said, wear whatever makes you comfortable. I'm just going casual, and sent her a picture of me in what I was wearing. Just a band t-shirt and chinos, very casual and comfortable. This served two purposes. I was a little chubby, and she was so clearly into me. I had convinced myself she wasn't aware of the chub, so I wanted her to know what to expect in an hour or so. She approved, couldn't wait to meet me, etc., and got on the road. So there was silence for a bit. I went to where we were meeting and told her where I was at. I saw her pull in and she texted asking where I was because she couldn't see me. So I got out of the car and walked toward hers because I could already see her. I texted back saying I'm near the bus shelter. I saw her get out of her car. She looked toward the bus shelter and saw me. Even in the dark of the evening, I saw her recoil at the sight of me. I could see her debating internally in a matter of seconds whether or not to just jump back into her car or give me a chance. I said hi, already knowing this was going to be terrible. We walked to the bowling alley where we planned to go, and I tried to give her a mini tour of the town because she hadn't been there before. But I was getting nothing in response. We got to the bowling alley, and I offered her a drink, but she turned me down. Okay. Fair enough, so I sipped my beer and tried to get a conversation out of her. But I was getting nothing back. We went to bowl our game, and I made jokes and tried to be silly to get her to laugh. But she spent almost all her time texting and giving me blunt responses. She won at bowling. I suck. That's just how it is. And I asked if she wanted to hang out a bit more or head home. She said she wanted to stay for a little while longer. So we sat at the bar, but we barely spoke because I was getting nothing out of her. Eventually, I just called it and said I had to be up early for work. I walked her to her car. She opened her door, turned around, held an arm out, and said, I'm not going to hug you. I just have a thing for physical contact on the first date. I said, okay, even though I didn't even go in for a hug or a kiss. I said, drive safe, and sent her on her way. I went home, and about an hour later, I got a text saying, just got home. Thanks for a lovely evening. And I never heard from her again. I was ghosted after that. Boy, was that a shot to the confidence. Super interested until she saw me in person. Then it was a total 180. Reddit Opinion 6. I've commented on this before in another post, but here it goes. I took a girl out to a fancy dinner at a well-known steakhouse that's about an hour away from where we lived. The dinner itself was great. She commented that her steak was fantastic and that she wasn't used to eating such high-quality, juicy steak. As we were waiting to exit the parking garage, she held her stomach and started freaking out, saying she needed to use the bathroom. I told her to run up the stairs because we were stuck in a long line waiting to leave the garage. She screamed at me to drive onto an empty floor. It was closing time, so all the cars had left towards the exit already. Once there, she started barking at me to get out of the car. I was at a loss for words and didn't know what was going on, so I obliged. She had an accident and soiled my passenger seat. She was clearly embarrassed, and I empathized with her as it was something she couldn't control. Luckily, I had a blanket in my truck, so she took off her dress, which was soiled, and put it in her purse. Then she wrapped herself in my blanket. The hour-long drive home was the longest hour of my life. We had our windows cracked open, trying to breathe through our mouths to avoid smelling the odor. I had her drop me off at home so she could clean her mess at her place and then come back to drop my car off the following day. She cleaned what she could and took it to a professional to deal with the rest. I still feel bad for anyone who sits in that seat. Reddit opinion 7. My college crush asked me out on a date, and I was thrilled. We went to a restaurant, got a table, and started chatting. About 10 minutes in, another guy showed up and sat down with us. I was super confused, but she introduced him as a friend, and I didn't know what to do. A few minutes later, this guy went to the bathroom, and while he was gone, she leaned in close to me. She told me that this was the guy she really wanted to date, but she wasn't sure if he was right for her. She wanted me to evaluate him because she valued my opinion and wouldn't date a guy I didn't approve of. She didn't exactly make a booty call in front of me, but she asked me on a date to get my approval for the guy she really wanted. Some things stick with you forever. Reddit opinion 8. I recently went on a first and only date with a girl who misrepresented herself on her dating profile. We went out for karaoke at her regular bar. Her profile said she didn't smoke, which was important to me because smoking is a turnoff. However, she spent 75% of the time outside smoking, and she smelled like an ashtray. She was 41, but looked 51, clearly using old pictures. Most of the time when she wasn't smoking, she was talking to other regulars. After about 2 hours, I cashed out and left. If there hadn't been karaoke, I would have left much sooner. She seemed surprised, but she was oblivious to the fact that she had ignored me and smelled disgusting. Reddit opinion 9. I went on a Tinder date, and we decided to have lunch. She turned out to be incredibly boring, giving one-word answers to most questions. The final straw was when she asked me what I did for a living, and I told her, explaining that I'm a manufacturing engineer, working for a large car company. Just after this, I went to the bathroom. On my way back to my seat, I noticed she was in the middle of Googling how much manufacturing engineers make a year. I finished my lunch and excused myself to the bathroom again. But this time, I just walked out and left. I didn't have time for people like that. Reddit opinion 10. I was hung up on a girl in high school and asked her to a dance. On the day of the dance, I was at a basketball game before, and she showed up with another guy. She told me she had changed her mind as she had started dating this guy a week before the dance, and she never even told me until the day of the event. The guy didn't even know anything about it. I immediately lost all respect for her. She already had a tendency to go through boyfriends quickly, and the new guy lasted another day before they broke up. Reddit opinion 11. I have a good one for you. The date started by her saying, "Oh, so you're like a strong 3. When I jokingly responded, "So, a 4, she reaffirmed. "Nah, a strong 3? After the cashier at the restaurant made a mistake calculating the bill and accidentally overcharged us for the drinks, she said. Aren't your people supposed to be good at math? We were at a Mexican restaurant. So not only was she being awfully racist, but it wasn't even the correct hateful stereotype, and the cashier was white. After sorting out the bill, I suggested we split it 50-50 since I had a bad time and didn't want or expect a second date. She responded with, "It's your treat," and walked out to wait for me on the sidewalk. Outside, she suggested we go back to her place, and despite her being attractive, I declined. She began screaming, demanding I go back with her, and complaining that she had just wasted a whole night. I bailed and ditched her, went home to tell my housemates about the disaster. One of them said, "Strong 3. Dude, that's terrible. You're not a strong 3. You're like a weak 5. So she basically called me a 4. Just say 4. Reddit opinion 12. Just the other night, I had a first and only date with a girl who misrepresented herself on her Plenty of Fish profile. We went out for karaoke at her regular bar. Her profile said she didn't smoke, which was a big deal for me, as I find smoking a turnoff. However, she spent about 75% of the time outside smoking, and she smelled like an ashtray. She was 41, but looked 51, clearly using old pictures. Most of the time when she wasn't smoking, she was talking to other regulars. After about 2 hours, I cashed out and left. If it weren't for the karaoke, I would have left much sooner. She seemed surprised, but was oblivious to the fact that she had ignored me and smelled disgusting. Thank you so much for watching. Your time and attention mean a lot to me. I hope you enjoyed the stories. I would be happy about a like. Please share your opinion about the posts in the comments. Also, subscribe to my channel and activate the bell. Have a wonderful day. See you next time.